being open to more than just the tempered system allows for a broader emotional palette. And
Hmm.
when I was a student here, I did my undergraduates here at the Academy of Music, musicology, and then composition. So within the musicology studies, we had an ethnomusicology, branch, which was led by an extraordinary professor, and she would send us out to the mountains to discover the voices and the music that surrounds us. And it was quite an awakening, because I was brought up on, Led Zeppelin and whatever it was going on in the 80s. And I thought, oh, well, we have all this music around here too. I had no idea. And so the way back then, we had a monochord. It's this thing of measuring pitch with one string, and one could just go move the little dial and then figure out where the pitch is. And doing quite a bit of that made me aware of why the clans high up in the mountains do what they do. They stand next to each other as resonators. They need to be touching. If the girls are singing, for instance, they would be touching each other, so that when they put the voice out, it has the sense of they're all vibrating, not just one singer, right? And I was measuring out that,
Hmm.
and some things I found out were quite beautiful, and spoke to me, given that I'm from this region, right? In a way that, all the rock and pop that I adored, and all the Scriabins that I adored, and all the mix of the German and Italian and everything that's happening in this region, um, just couldn't reach emotionally. So I thought, when I started composing, I said, well, I shouldn't exclude this. There will be probably a time when I would want to experiment with these kinds of tonal relationships. Uh, but then, during my graduate studies, and it was the first multimedia program in the States, so I was, invited to look for new and experiment, and I couldn't be happier. So I found out that I actually don't want to use the original tuning that I measured and figured out with my colleagues back at the academy, but that now that I knew electronics and was learning more and more how to be a producer and how to, put a bow on top of my sound, so to speak, that allowed me the contact with the electronics allowed me to find the tunings that are in this particular piece. So it was kind of like going to the future to rediscover the past, to then be in the present, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And then I measured them, actually, because I could on a synthesizer, and that's how I could, teach the violinist or whoever else is playing in some of my other works what that is. But what I had discovered is that what I'm doing is quite different from the mathematical breaking down of the scale, in a sense of what a lot of Western composers are doing and calling it microtonal music. I found out that microtonality is not an after the fact process. It is a pre-thought. It is a process of organically internalizing and uh, creating sonic pictures that emote a kind of emotionality that, at the time when I was doing this piece, spoke to me as a woman, as a young person discovering new technologies and new everything, and also reclaiming of something that I hadn't heard in Western music before, nor Eastern. I mean, this is sort of like a blend of things. So this is unique tuning that sits on the shoulders of what I had heard, as a little girl as well, but also then studied, in college. And I have other pieces that uh, use similar tuning. One of them is Sabih's Dream, which is on the same album as Teke, and it's basically a fantasy piece about a flight of an Arabian horse. And I happen to love Arabians, and there's a breeding place nearby. And the experience of flying on one of those animals, up there, it's sort of like they give you the horse and say, oh, if you know how to ride, if you come back, good for you, like that. So, so I could take the horse and experience, being in the mountains for the whole day. And so I realized that some of the feelings, emotions I had could not be expressed just with a tempered system. So again, I reached out for pulling in some microtonal elements, and in that piece, more than in Teke, there is sort of a section that's microtonal, then it goes to tempered, then it goes to then it goes to tempered. So it's sort of a different setup, but that's one of the pieces that has, if you want to listen, that has a lot, and it's string quartet with electronics. So maybe you can, discover some of that tuning there. But that's a long, convoluted answer to your question.
But I'm fascinated by it, because I do feel that sense that you talked about. It doesn't feel mathematical, which of course, as a performer, sometimes you get a new piece of music and you're trying to explore it, and you delve into it. And so my initial kind of reaction was, oh, well, where do I have to place these tones, kind of very analytically? But the more I kind of, we talked back and forth, and you kind of mentioned this feeling of like closeness, that was really helpful for me, because I realized it's also a sense of something that's just expanded from what we know as a more typical tempered system. And so that there's like an emotional element to it that was actually really, really helpful for me as a performer to like go through with it. So I appreciate you kind of talking about that, because I find it fascinating. So
great. I mean, it's like neural networks. We build the dendrites and the connections based on the experiences that are new. That is the new stuff, right? So for me to try to do the tuning that already exists anywhere for some of these pieces would not be, bringing the new, would not be challenging the audience. But I'm also very careful not to drop my audience. In other words, I will give them the new if I prep them and they're enough in the piece that I can, bring, extend something or put them out on the ledge, but never let them fall into an abyss without anything to hold on to. Because once that happens, it's very hard to bring them back in, and they lose faith in their own ability to grow with the language of music. So so thank you for that. And the closeness, you have such terrific ears that once you got into swing of things, dancing on that level, it's not huge gestures. So it is only natural that the pitches would be closer by, so that they could kind of be like tremors in the brain until it becomes bigger, and then seismic stuff then appears really large, because you gave the audience a place where it's more close, and then all of a sudden it opens up and it's huge. And so I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I love when that happens.
Yeah.